Welcome to Reviving Faith, addressing church decline and embracing renewal. I'm Reverend Natalie Justice, and each week we'll sit down with pastors from across the United Methodist Connection to talk about the real challenges facing the church and the hope that keeps us moving forward. Together we'll explore what's behind church decline, what's working to re-engage and attract new members, and how churches can stay true to their faith while adapting to a challenging world. The challenges are big, but God is bigger. Let's dive in. We are honored to welcome our special guest, Rev.Matt Rawle, pastor of Asbury United Methodist Church in Bossier City, Louisiana. Reverend Rawle is the author of several books, including The Heart That Grew Three Sizes and The Faith of a Mockingbird. His most recent book, The Final Days, is already making an impact, and we look forward to the release of his newest work, Faith Over Fear, Abraham's Imperfect Journey, coming April 15th. We hope this conversation blesses and renews you. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so excited to have Reverend Matt Rawle with us. Matt, thank you for joining the conversation today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Natalie.
So we'll just kind of dive right in. The first
Yeah.
question I have is, what do you believe are the primary causes of church decline in the United States, and how do these challenges uniquely affect your congregation?
Yeah, that's a super question. Well, one, I think the pandemic revealed just how extracurricular church was, really. Because I think it was masking prior to the pandemic activities and finances and big fun things that we were doing at church was masking the fact that church was one of the things that families were doing instead of the central influence of families. And when I say families, as in groups of people, and I think a single person with a group of friends is a family, right? Jesus said, those who do the will of my Father is a family, right? So, according to the church, water is thicker than blood, right? Our baptismal waters are thicker than blood. That's what I mean by families. Let me clarify that. So post pandemic, I think churches were finding such a struggle because we realized, like, oh my gosh, we have not been at the center of things as we thought we had been at the center of things. Um, so part of the decline is the church needs to re-narrate our role in people's lives, also in society. And it's not just about like prayer in school or 10 commandments. It is the heartbeat of who we are, or it should be the heartbeat of who we are. People will invest their time and their energy and themselves into things that they find meaning, where they find meaning, right? So I think one of the church's primary roles today is to rediscover our meaning and to help others capture what that meaning is. What is the role of the church? Is it the place where our kids go on the weekends to have fun and fellowship? Is it where our seniors gather to find deep and abiding friendships, perhaps in the midst of being a widow? And is the church's? I've done a lot of thinking about this. Is the church's primary role today, especially with young adults, is to combat loneliness? Several years ago, when I was in divinity school, I lived on East Campus. I went to Duke Divinity School, and I lived off of East Campus, and I had to take a bus every day to get to the West Campus. And that particular day, we were doing a prayer meeting or a prayer gathering, a worship service. And we, as divinity school students, were hearing prayer concerns, kind of an altar call kind of experience right at the end. And come on down, let's have a prayer. And I remember when I was riding the bus to the service, the bus was overcrowded. I mean, it was like standing room only. It's like an airport shuttle in Atlanta, like you're arm to arm with people, and everyone had their earbuds in and kind of minding their own business. And so I get to the prayer service, and I didn't know quite what to expect. Like, what will be the prayers? What will I hear? And I was surprised. I heard very little about relationships. I heard very little about grades. I heard very little about finance. The number one prayer concern was loneliness.
Mm.
And I thought, how could you be lonely on an overcrowded bus? And it's because either we are taught to be super independent, either we are taught to only socialize through our phones. Whatever the case, we have become very, very siloed in our day to day, right? So I think part of the church's role, in terms of recognizing like attendance is down and people are not connecting with the church, is because they're no longer finding meaning here. And I would love to say that that meaning is rooted in theology. I wish that was the case. I wish people would come to Asbury because the sermons were so theologically rich and it was expanding their mind. And, you know, I think what that means here is to connect people with other people and in that relationship help them find meaning.
Mhm.
And I think that's it. I think people fall in love with things that are meaningful to them. And we as a church, the shock of the pandemic is that we were not nearly as meaningful in people's lives as we thought we were. We were
Mhm.
taking a lot of things for granted. So we need to not reinvent our theology, at least as a Wesleyan, as a United Methodist. I think we have a fantastic story, a beautiful theology that is centered in grace. It's centered in works of justice and mercy. Our theology is great. Now, with John Wesley, one of the things I love about the United Methodist Church is that if our theology is not working with real people in real time, we need to go back into the lab and rethink things, right?
Mm.
So it's not that we protect our theology at all costs, and that's I think another question you may ask is kind of the relationship between culture, right, and theology, and we'll get into that. But the short answer is the church is not as meaningful as we thought we were in
Mhm.
people's lives and in societies, at least in terms of true abiding meaning of because religion. There are three questions: who am I? Where did I come from? And what is good?
Mm.
Those are kind of the three central questions of religion. And if we as a church are not helping people answer those questions legitimately and with purpose and meaning, we will be relegated to extracurricular activity. So
Mhm.
I think that, at least in my context, is the answer of how do I describe decline? Is that we have lost meaning in people's lives, and we need to re-narrate and recapture what is important.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, in your experience, what strategies or practices have proven effective in re-engaging congregants and attracting new members? Although I kind of I want to flip that, maybe even make it more about making disciples versus attracting new members.
Yeah, sure.
And particularly our younger generation, we've kind of hit nail on the head. The culture has changed, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
just got to think differently. But so, what are some strategies that you and or practices?
Yeah, well, I think, and we could talk about. I think that the most variety in terms of new is the delivery systems of what we offer as a church. Now, uh, you will attract people if you speak truth. You will attract the people who are called to where you are. I do believe that congregations and churches go through seasons of what their purpose is and what God is calling them to do as a community of faith. We are not meant to be the church for all people in all situations in all places. I think churches are called to. That's also again not trying to plug the United Methodist Church with every question that I answer, but the importance of the connectional system is that Asbury, my home church, Asbury United Methodist Church in Bossier City, can lean into what we do well and what we are called to do. And then First United Methodist Church of Bossier City can lean into what they are doing well, and we can work together as a team. In terms of connecting with people, um, the truth is there. When you proclaim truth, the people who are called to be with you will come to you. I believe the role of the Holy Spirit in that. Though the delivery systems have changed, right?
Mhm.
My kids, for example, they experience information and the truth of information through a screen.
Mhm.
And their relationships, in large part, what happens over their phone is real. Because for my generation, you might make a connect with someone over a tweet or a text, but meeting them in person, ultimately, like for coffee, is still kind of that's real.
Mhm.
Not for my kids. I think I'm onto something where um, we have to pay attention to the way in which, particularly our children, I say our children, my children, let me just make it very personal, and then your audience can translate that however they need to in their context. My kids experience truth vertically. And what I mean by that is that they scroll from bottom to top as they're learning about their life, whether it's homework on Google Classroom, whether it's TikTok, whether it is Insta Reels. The way that they are learning about their world and interacting with their world is a vertical from bottom to top experience, literally, in terms of dexterity and what their information they're receiving. Things that are letterbox, so from left to right, is still considered entertainment. Movies, their computer screens if they're watching something, or like Disney Plus, something like that. Dating apps, for example, are left to right, like swiping this way or that way. So entertainment, frivolity, fun connection is a left to right experience. When they're experiencing truth, when they're learning about their world, that is now a vertical experience from bottom to top. So as a church, Natalie, this is the kind of stuff that I wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about, like, oh my gosh, the church needs to have a vertical experience. And what I mean by
Mm.
that is creating a mechanism to deliver the gospel in a language that they understand.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the church would be well served to always have Acts chapter 2 in their vision, in the foreground, because there was this moment where the Holy Spirit gifted the church to communicate with people in a way that they need to be heard, and the way they need to hear and receive information. That is always changing, right? Our truth doesn't change. Our theology doesn't change necessarily. We'll get to that. But the delivery mechanism, we should be masters, master storytellers of how to do this. And the way to tell stories, not the story itself necessarily, but the way we tell stories must adapt and change over time. So how do we connect with people? Is to deliver, or to discover the delivery system that makes sense for them. And there are some instances in my home church where I've been very wrong,
Mhm.
but also very pleased that I've been wrong. Like, been wrong in the best of cases. For example, I have been so resistant to bringing back the children's moment, and you
Mm.
can call me Grinch if you want to. I wrote a book about it. So, but since the pandemic, it was just like, I don't want to do a children's moment. It's just entertainment. Like, the children aren't really getting anything out of it. And finally, I brought back the children's moment, and it was like a breath of fresh air in the midst of the worship service. It was beautiful. It's fun. It's a moment of, I think everyone takes a deep breath and exhales when it's
Mhm.
the children's moment, right? It's just this kind of this beautiful thing. And I'm so thankful that I was so wrong. I was so wrong about that. Um, but I'm really thankful that we reincorporated that. An example in terms of delivery system is that I've been so resistant to, for example, like paper bulletins, because after the pandemic, we went full digital, and I was my first adopter, early adopter, innovation, futuristic self, was very pleased, and my inner child was very happy that everything was so digital. We even
Mhm.
have digital. So in our sanctuary, you can have these cards that have a little sticker on the back that has uh, a radio frequency. It's not RFID. It's the other one. I want to say NFC. Anyway, and it's a card, and there's a cross on it, and it has our logo, and it says, "Hold your phone over the cross to check in." So you literally you tap your phone. It's on the baptismal font. I love this. You remember your baptism and also check your attendance. You tap
Mhm.
your phone on the baptismal font, and you automatically get checked into our Google form. Um, but there was a whole demographic of our congregation who was not going to do that.
Mhm.
So I had to, and I was really resistant to it, but we brought back paper bulletins. I do surveys a lot. We print the surveys as well now, because there's sometimes analog is still very trusted to a particular demographic in the church. So some things don't need to be reinvented.
Mhm.
And for me, now I'm preaching to me, we need to get over ourselves
Mhm.
and realize that some things don't need to be reinvented, and that's okay. You are not stifling technology. You are not moving forward by somehow resisting some of these analog technologies that are trusted and tangible for a lot of people. So for me, I had to get over myself and realize, like, oh, well, maybe having print bulletins is not a terrible thing. We'll bring those back, and it has been lovely and wonderful ever since then.
Awesome. So let me ask you, how can churches balance staying true to their theological foundation while adapting to changing cultural landscapes to remain relevant and impactful. It's, you're talking about some stuff, and it's so true how even in 10 years ago things are different.
Oh my gosh,
Even
5 years ago.
5 years ago, it's completely
Yes.
different. So
So yeah,
yeah,
um, that's a great question, Natalie. So, one, I think we need to recognize that theology and culture are not independent.
mhm,
Our theology, and folks might not like to admit this, but our theology is a result of our cultural understanding of
mhm,
each other and our cultural understanding of God, right?
mhm,
Those things are not independent of each other. So when we talk about how do we stay true to our theological foundation, but also be culturally relevant, uh, step one is to recognize that those are not mutually exclusive things, right?
mhm,
And again, one of the things I love about the United Methodist Church is that if our theology is no longer relevant, we need to get back into the lab and rework some things. And I love, for example, 1739 was a big year for we who are United Methodists. Um, in 1739, the Wesleys, Charles, wrote "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and it was written for two reasons. One, it was a response to field preaching because that's when we went out to the factories, right? What does it look like for theology to be relevant again? Well, to be with people, right? To go to where the people are who need to hear the gospel. If you want to be relevant, then go where the people are, right? Step one. But in that hymn, it was also written against predestination because
mhm,
the Wesley brothers were not getting along with Whitfield,
mhm,
uh, and the Calvinist teaching of predestination.
mhm,
So when you look at the lyrics of "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," that now becomes very clear of what was going on at the time. Field preaching, they went to where the people. I want to be where the people are. I want to see, right. So they went out to the factories and they were with the people, but also they were pushing against a theology that they disagreed with. So "Hark the Herald Angels Sing" is a really great example of how to be theologically relevant and also culturally relevant at the same time. So when you look at the lyrics, right? Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn king. Okay, we're good right there. Peace on earth, not just peace to the elect. Peace
mm,
on earth and mercy mild, God and sinners, not God and the elect. God and sinners reconciled, joyful. How many nations? All ye nations rise,
mhm,
join the tribe. So it's this almost it's dangerously universal for the Wesley brothers, but it's a much more universal picture of God's mercy and grace being bestowed upon all of us. And I am assuming that they had the working poor in the fields in mind when they were writing such a hymn. And it
mm,
was so effective in terms of blending culture and theology that I don't think theology suffered at all. And I don't think the culture suffered at all, or that it was so highfalutin that culturally they didn't understand it. It was so impactful, in fact, that I think every Christian denomination on the planet sings this song, or most of them. Most of the ones I can name, at least I'm sure, know "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." Here's the fun twist with that hymn: is that it was kind of written against George Whitfield
mm,
and published after he went back to England. The version that exists in our hymnal today was later edited by Whitfield. So it's actually Whitfield's version of a hymn written against him that made it into the hymnal, which is just hilarious. I mean, later they reconciled, Whitfield and the
mhm,
Wesleys reconciled, because the original text was "Hark how all the welkin ring," and that didn't flow off the tongue as easy as "Hark the herald angels sing." All of that to say, how do we remain true to theology, but also culturally relevant? Hark to compose "Hark the herald angels sing." There, next question, right? To lean in, I'm a bit biased here, but to lean into art, to lean into music, to lean into innovation. Innovation simply is where creativity and utility meet. In other words, where something that is unique to your people matches something that is also useful to them. And that is when culture and theology come together in a very, very beautiful way, right?
mhm,
Technology or innovation is not just about technology and something that has an on switch, right? Field preaching was an innovation. Hymnody was an innovation, right? So when we can get, because if you have creativity with no utility, you've created art, which is important and beautiful and wonderful. If you have utility with no creativity, you've created efficiency, which is also needed and important, but ministry happens when those two things collide.
Mhm.
Meaning, right? How do we capture people? We re-narrate meaning, right?
Mhm.
Meaning happens when uniqueness is married to usefulness in our congregations. So if you want to reach people through prayer and discernment, who is God calling you to be uniquely in your place? How do we make it beautiful and accessible and true?
Mhm.
And then I think the church will begin to recapture meaning in people's lives.
So my final question is, just to broaden the audience scope, you'll have people listen to this who within pastors of large churches to small churches, as
Yeah,
well as laity, and we all have been impacted by this decline. In
sure.
some form or fashion. So, if you're speaking to these guys and they need some encouragement, what is some encouragement that you can give them as they're trying to transition into something different?
Yeah, this is not deeply theological or highfalutin. It's really simple. It's three things.
Mhm.
Breathe. Number one, breathe.
Mhm.
Breathe. Breathe. Take a breath. Take a very deep breath. Number two, fuel well. Pay attention to what you're eating. Fuel your body and your time with good things, right?
Mhm.
And third is be a champion of taking naps. And so, it's not, it's pretty practical, but it has served me well. Number one is breathe. Your body is built when you're feeling anxious. Uh, a built-in mechanism is deep breathing, right? Just take a breath. Take a deep breath. We talk about the spirit being the breath of God, and I think that is beautiful and meaningful and true. Take a deep breath. Air is still free. It's one of the few things that's still free.
Mhm.
So breathe, fuel well. And that doesn't mean just like make sure you have a high protein and high fiber diet. It's also fueling your time well.
Mm.
Read more than you scroll, right?
Mhm.
Think more than you speak,
Mhm.
right? Fuel yourself well. And then number three, look, the world will keep spinning, I promise. There will still be more on the to-do list tomorrow. I promise. You don't have to get it all done today. I promise. I promise. We've lost the art of Sabbath taking. And I don't mean like when you take Sabbath, you can't do any work at all. Like no, but it is a reminder that God is still here even when your computer's closed. you
Mhm.
know, and even when you I've become a master at taking the 22.5 minute nap.
Mhm.
I'll do this. I'll do this in the middle of the day. I literally, and my staff knows, because I'm garbage. I'm absolute garbage at like 1:15 in the afternoon. Like
Mhm.
I'm not getting anything done either. I'm going to be scrolling Facebook anyway. I'm not going to be. So I set a timer for 22.5 minutes, and I just sit. Sometimes it's meditation. Sometimes it's a legit nap, where let's just shut it down for a second. Let's just shut it down, and then re-engage later. Like magic, like magic. You're much more effective, right? So number one, Natalie, breathe.
Mhm.
Number two, fuel yourself well. And
Mhm.
number three, set an alarm for 22.5 minutes and don't do anything. Get good at getting bored.
Mm.
Get good at being bored, right? Because then you're going to be wanting to kill your boredom, and then you become super effective. So breathe, fuel yourself well, and get good at being bored. There you go.
Thank you so much for those who are watching. I hope this blessed you, and I hope you tune into the next one as we continue to have these conversations. And Matt, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Natalie. Appreciate it.